Hi lovelies, welcome back. I'm coming to you from very snowy Roslyn, BC, where it is an absolute winter wonderland outside, and it's so exciting to finally get snow. So I wanted to talk about psychological innocence today, because I know I briefly touched on it in the last video, but it is so important to see both like what it is and what implications it has for our lives. Because psychological innocence is simply the understanding that we're always doing the best we can in every moment, given how life looks to us, given how we understand life, given how reality seems to us. And we can't do any better than that. We can't jump above how reality seems and act in a reality that we don't live in. So understanding more about what's behind that reality, like when we say we all live in separate realities, and when we say that we're doing the best given how life looks to us, given how reality looks to us, it's worth taking a look at, well, what creates that reality? And fortunately, it doesn't come from circumstances or people or events or places or things. It comes from thought, which means that we are constantly living in this creative energy that's giving us life, it's giving us experience, it's giving us reality. And the good news about that is it's always changing. We're always living in this flow of energy where we get high moods and low moods. We feel great, we feel awful. We feel grateful, we feel depressed. We kind of always fluctuate and flow into different feeling states all the time. And what psychological innocence does is it shows us that, okay, like you're feeling what you're thinking in that moment. And you're living in the reality of that moment. And you can only be expected to do the best you can do in that moment. And it allows us to have a lot more compassion and a lot more forgiveness and a lot more understanding for when we're not, or other people aren't, living up to the standard we think they should be. And it's so easy to get stuck in thinking that we should do better, others should do better, things should be better. But things can only be as good as they can be given how we understand what's going on. And so when people are, just to give an example, I woke up this morning to the news of another mass shooting in the States, which at this point is not surprising anymore. It's going to keep happening until people understand, what's going on in their minds. And what I mean by people understand what's going on in their minds is, as long as somebody feels like life is victimizing them, feels like they got the short end of the stick, feels like happiness and joy and peace isn't available to them, feels like everybody else has something they don't have, feels like they're less than or lacking or incredibly insecure, but it's everybody else's fault that they are that way, or it's life's fault or it's circumstances' fault, then of course based on the principle of the fact that we do the best we can given how we understand reality, if it looks to that person like, well, it's all of these people that are causing me to feel this way, then it's not that surprising that they're going to pick up a gun and shoot a bunch of people. It's not that surprising that in a case of war where two sides believe the other side is making me feel like this, that they're going to take violent, extreme, drastic measures against the other party. It's not surprising that in a relationship that has so much conflict and strife and struggle and abuse, that it's two people believing that the other person is letting them down or not fulfilling their needs or doing something to them, and is just constantly battling against that. And so psychological innocence is seeing that if that's somebody's reality, they're going to act in accordance. And when we see deeper, how realities get created, that they're only thought, they're maintained in thought. And the good news is that thought is an ever-changing, ever-moving target. It's this flow that's going to self-correct if we let it. Then people won't be so compelled to act on what they believe in the moment or what they think in the moment or how life looks in the moment. Because every single person listening to this has had times where life has looked awful and scary and hard and difficult and just sometimes downright hopeless. Everybody knows what that's like. But the difference that makes a difference of why some people go and shoot up a bar or a school or whatever else they're engaging in a violent act about, and people who don't, is based on how they understand what's going on, and do they kind of see that they're just in a really, really low state and they'll bounce out of it. And when people don't see that, they do horrible things because their behaviors are just aligned with their level of understanding. And when they do see that they're just in a temporary funk, a temporary kind of fog or filter or, distortion of negative, untrue thinking, then they'll know to let the mind settle and self-correct. And so ultimately what it comes down to is seeing psychological innocence in ourselves and others leads us back to that truth. It leads us back to really seeing, people just do the best they can given how they understand reality. And not only does it allow us to take away a lot of judgment and fear and just kind of unhelpful negative emotions that we put on other people and put on the world and put on everything else, but it allows us to see that the only way we're going to get change is if we all kind of wake up to how the mind works. The only way that things are going to be different is if we collectively realize what's going on. Wow, we can only act given how we think in the moment. And if we don't understand that that moment is temporary, transient, and illusory, we're going to do really harmful, painful things. And if we understand that that's something that our minds are going to dip into, but we know enough not to take it seriously, then we're not going to go start wars and shoot up bars and put children in cages and commit other acts of violence, because that doesn't make sense if we know that we're going to bounce out of it. So psychological innocence isn't about just giving people free passes. It's about seeing what's behind the behavior, what led to that happening. It's looking upstream to, we can't tackle gun violence or war or poverty or anything at that level of behavior. We have to go up and, look at education and look at what people are understanding about their mind, what misunderstandings are people under that's causing them suffering and causing them to do harmful things to themselves and others. And psychological innocence in relationships plays out the same way, that it's not about blaming the other person or, they should have done better. I can't believe they messed up. I can't believe they made this mistake. It's really seeing that, wow, they did the best they could given how they understood it. And from that place of forgiveness, we're more open to pointing out to them, well, your state of mind is fluid and your state of mind is going to shift and change. And it's going to do all those things already, but you're going to do yourself and others less damage if you know that's how it works. If you understand that the system works that way, then you're not going to be tempted to, be violent or break up with someone or do those things from that insecure state, because you see that that insecure state is totally self-correcting and totally going to change and fix itself without any doing on your part whatsoever. And psychological innocence with ourselves is much the same way. We don't have to beat ourselves up or get down on ourselves or hard on ourselves for making a mistake. It's like we do the best we can given how life looks to us in the moment. And we keep just looking towards the truth of how our reality is being created so that we can see more and more about it and more about our capacity to have a fresh start in any moment, our capacity to have things be different, our capacity for growth and evolution, not as a result of deliberately changing, but as a result of looking towards truth and letting that do the heavy lifting. So whether it's with ourselves or with a relationship or on a global scale, it's never about trying to change the behavior at the behavior level. We want to go upstream and see, well, that behavior was simply a result of a misunderstanding. It is a result of taking our thinking way too seriously, buying into it way too much and misunderstanding that its source is coming from within when it really, really looks like it's coming from out there. And when we see this, we see the innocence in ourselves, we see the innocence in our partners, and we see the innocence in others. And from that place, change happens. From that place, peace arises. From that place, we're less tempted to go into all of the problems and all of the issues and all the things that need to be fixed. And we just go back to, well, if reality is created by thought and if thought changes, then all we need to do is ride out the insecurity, ride out the misunderstanding, ride out the distorted state of mind, and we'll naturally come back to a deeper, truer, more joyful place within us. So I hope this is helpful, and I'll be back with you guys shortly. Take care.